Through its worldwide resources, EWTN presents a truly global perspective of our Catholic faith. Welcome to Catholic Sphere. I'm Brian Patrick, and this time we're going to explore authentic witness to our Catholic faith during these difficult times, building on the example of the martyrs. We'll also preview this month's March for Life in Washington and examine the global pro-life movement for 2021. First, let's meet our contributors. Edy Morel from Lima, Peru. Martin Rothweiler in Cologne, Germany. And joining us for the very first time, Most Reverend Andrzej Siemieniewski, Auxiliary Bishop of Wrocław, Poland. Excellency, welcome to the Catholic Sphere. In a homily you preached on EWTN about martyrdom, you pointed out that to be martyred means to be saved for eternity. Please explain that and how the witness of the martyrs might inspire us today to be willing to suffer for our faith.
It would be useful to recall that the very word martyr means a witness. And a very important question, why do we need witnesses in our faith? Because if the Christian faith were only the matter of ideas and human reasoning, we would need only handbooks and lectures and maybe classrooms. But no, we need witnesses, because the faith is much more similar to fire. Jesus Christ says in the Gospel, I have come to set the earth on fire, and how I wish it were already blazing. And you can ignite a fire only from another living flame. And a witness is someone on fire. It is fire of the Holy Spirit. It means fire of love, of hope, of faith. Someone who can ignite faith in another people's hearts. For example, the very first Christian martyr, Saint Stephen, we know him from the Acts of the Apostles, died in persecution. But he died with burning desire in his heart, desire of evangelizing other people, also his persecutors. So even if his soul went to heaven and his body went to the grave, the flame that remained ignited the heart of one of his persecutors, Saul, who became the Apostle Paul. We see how it is important to have in mind the real relics, if you can say so. We venerate frequently the physical relics of our martyrs, and justly so. But even more important, it is to venerate the spiritual relics. That is the legacy, that is the example of our holy martyrs.
Well, I love that image of Saint Stephen. That description in Acts of the Apostles talks about how his face was filled with light and joy, even in his martyrdom. Martin, let's go to Germany now and tell us about the Martyrologium, of the 20th century. That was initiated by St. John Paul II about a quarter century ago, wasn't it?
Yes, exactly. John Paul II, he suffered under the Second World War, he suffered under communism, and I think he was well aware of the many martyrs of the 20th century. And I think he wanted to put emphasis on this big spiritual treasure for the church, for the work of evangelization, to have these many blood witnesses. And so his idea was in 1994 to ask all the bishops' conferences around the world to collect stories of saints, of martyrs of the 20th century in their respective regions. And one of the fruits in Germany was, for example, it's now two volumes with more than 1,200 pages about 900 martyrs. A church historian, a priest in Germany, Prelate Moll, was asked to do this, did research together with 135 experts, and the result was great. So we have a big martyrologium. There was 4 categories of martyrs. One category was those who sacrificed their blood under the Nazi regime, those under communism. There are those who suffered the martyrium puritatis, so defending her purity women, sisters, young girls, religious sisters that defended their purity, and missionaries. These are the four categories. And I think there are big examples among them, and it shows also the resistance of so many Catholics under the Nazi regime. And I remember or would like to recall Fritz Gerlich. He's a journalist. Already in the early 30s, he wrote a lot of articles against Hitler, against the ideology of the Nazi regime. He was put into prison in 33 and died in 34 in the concentration camp in Dachau. He was a convert, and during his prison time, he even helped 3 co-prisoners to convert to the Catholic faith. So it's a great witness also for us journalists.
Yeah, it's important to remember that we have martyrs in every era of the history of our church. In fact, just this past year, in 2019, or 2020, I believe, we lost the number was 20, I believe, missionaries. There were about a half a dozen priests, some religious sisters, some lay people. The Vatican reported on that. 20 missionaries lost to a form of martyrdom over the past year. Edy, there in Peru, in Lima, what can you tell us about Latin America's legacy of martyrdom?
Well, I mean, we just started in 1991. There was 3 missionaries here in Peru who are the first beatified missionaries for being martyrs in the Peruvian territory. Talking about 2 Polish missionaries, Miguel Tomasek and Zbigniew Strawolski, and also an Italian missionary, Alessandro Dordi, who were killed by communist, Maoist ideology terrorists who basically, I mean, what they said, they didn't like these priests, they didn't like missionaries in general because they sowed hope in the people. They gave the people hope of a better life, not in terms of violence, but in terms of conversion, right? The Christian alternative, the revolution of God, as Pope Benedict XVI used to call it, right? I mean, which is personal conversion for the conversion of the world also, right? In the measure that can be done. But they were being warned not to be witnesses to Christian hope. And since they wouldn't desist, they were shot down. Of course, our first witnesses here, heroic witnesses to Christian holiness, were not martyrs. Of course, St. Rose of Lima, St. Martin of Porres, St. Torribius of Mogrovejo, and others who were contemporaries at the foundation of this new country, which became really a racially mixed, integrated country, and where Catholic faith is a defining value of Catholics still today, which is manifested, for example, in things that we'll talk later, a great appreciation and respect for life, and for the difference that Christian faith makes in society, a more humane, a more charitable, a more understanding and solidarious society, which is what the Catholic Church brings where it is established deeply.
Edy Morel in Lima, Peru. As the Catholic Sphere continues on EWTN, we have the inspiring story of a 20th century martyr who, though merely a child, forgave her killer on her deathbed. Joining us for the Catholic Sphere on EWTN. I'm Brian Patrick, along with Edy Morel in Lima, Peru, Martin Rothweiler in Germany, and Bishop Andrzej Siemieniewski of Poland. Christians have endured martyrdom for many reasons, not the least of which is purity. Now we look to a young girl whose powerful, pure witness converted the man who killed her. Here's Alan Holdren.
In a small Italian village southwest of Rome sits the house that the Goretti and Serenelli families shared in the early 20th century. Both poor families moved to the Italian west coast in search of a better life. In 1902, 20-year-old Alessandro Serenelli developed a blind passion for 11-year-old Maria Goretti. The Passionist sister, who's now the custodian of the historic home, describes what happened the afternoon of July the 5th, 1902, after the young man had propositioned the girl several times to no avail.
That day, she wasn't here. She was outside, and he made a claim that day. If she doesn't accept, I'll kill her. That day, Alessandro had chosen his weapon. It was an awl, a labor tool that he was using that day. It was a well-defined and deliberate action. He leaves work, climbs these stairs, and Marietta finds him out there.
Alessandro stabbed Maria 14 times, leaving her in a pool of blood. It took 5 hours in a carriage for the wounded girl to get to the nearest hospital in Nettuno. The following day, July the 6th, 1902, Maria received the last sacraments and before her death, forgave her attacker.
Maria Goretti, on her deathbed, to the question of the confessor, of the priest who asked her if she was willing to forgive Alexander, Maria Goretti replied, "Heartfelt forgiveness, and I want him with me in paradise."
After his release, he entered as a lay brother into a Capuchin monastery, where he remained until his death in 1970.
In a message during the Year of Mercy, in which Pope Francis, in this message, presents Maria Goretti as the Saint of Forgiveness, and in the simple terms, in this speech, says that those who come here to Nettuno, those who visit the Tent of Forgiveness, those who visit the House of Martyrdom, who come into contact with this saint, must let themselves be infected by this ability of Maria Goretti to forgive, and if this does not happen, it has not been made an authentic pilgrimage, but rather a touristic visit.
Maria Goretti was canonized in the presence of her mother and siblings in St. Peter's Square on July the 6th, 1950. Pope Pius XII proclaimed her the patron saint of chastity and victims of sexual violence.
Thank you, Alan Holdren, and all the folks at EWTN's Vatican Bureau. What a beautiful story. So let's go back to Martin in Germany. You spoke earlier of hundreds of German martyrs from the past century. Can we draw a connection between St. Maria Goretti and one of those courageous Catholics, Martin?
There's even a direct connection, if you want, so to a young lady called Brigitte Irrgang. She was killed in 1954 when she was defending her purity against someone who wanted to rape her. And this young girl, this was at the age of 12, and this young girl, her favorite saint was Saint Maria Goretti. And Saint Maria Goretti was even supposed also to be her patron saint for her confirmation, but she was killed before her confirmation. And a few days, as her mother reported, this young girl, Brigitte, had the image of Saint Maria Goretti in her hands and said, said to her mother, "What a beautiful girl! I know everything about her." And people that knew Brigitte, they said they compared her very much so to Saint Maria Goretti. And I still knew two priests, the brothers, 2 of the 5 brothers of Brigitte became priests. There was a very special event a few years ago because a composer composed an oratory about her, about this martyr of charity, this female martyr of charity. And EWTN Germany had the chance to broadcast live this premiere of this oratory. So we made DVDs and hopefully helped to spread this witness of this young girl as a martyr of chastity, as a martyr of purity.
That's a great production. It's available through EWTN's religious catalog. Now, you might think, what does this have to do with me? These martyrs. Few of us will be asked to give up our life for our faith, but Bishop Andrzej, is it possible for us to experience some level of martyrdom for the faith without actually giving up our physical life? I'm thinking here of Cardinal Stefan Wyszynski.
This year, 2021, was designated by the Polish Parliament the year of Cardinal Wyszynski. Was he a martyr? One can say, well, he died a natural death. That's true. But let us recall some facts. During the World War II, 50% of clergy of his native diocese died in Nazi persecution. 25% went through the Dachau concentration camp. These are big numbers. It already makes 3/4 of the whole clergy in the diocese. So Cardinal Wyszynski had to go into hiding in different places during all the years of the war. At the end of the war near Warsaw, and he had to see the total destruction of his beloved city of Warsaw. Then after the war, he became bishop and the primate of Poland, and he was arrested and imprisoned for 3 years by the communists. So there is a martyrdom, not in the form of actually dying, death of persecution, but being ready and to show it in his life. And his readiness was not a passive one, it was an active, being actively ready to martyrdom, as it says in the scriptures, that those who are led by the Spirit of God are children of God, are led actively to do things out of this spirit of being ready to martyrdom. From his confinement, he wrote the famous text, the vows of the Polish nation, that were proclaimed in the shrine of Częstochowa in the year 1956. And this was a very powerful message from an imprisoned primate to the Catholic people of Poland. And he recalled the basic facts of Christian life. He wrote in these vows of the Polish nation, we are the royal priesthood because we are baptized and we are called to fight in a battle under the banner of our faith. And the holder of this banner is, of course, the Blessed Mother of God, Our Lady, Mary. And what was the main purpose of this fight? As he said it in the vows of the Polish nation, we are fighting against our national vices.
Thank you, Bishop Andrzej, for sharing that inspiring story of Cardinal Wyszynski. Of course, he was an outspoken voice for the pro-life movement long before we called it a movement. In our next segment, we'll go to Lima, Peru, where Edy Morel will tell us about a huge march for life there that seems to have disappeared. Stay with us for more of the Catholic Sphere on EWTN. Thanks again for joining us for the Catholic Sphere on EWTN. Through our worldwide resources, we bring you a truly global perspective of our Catholic faith. I'm Brian Patrick, along with Bishop Andrzej Siemieniewski in Poland, Edy Morel in Peru, and Martin Rothweiler in Germany. Edy, let's go to you and talk about that March for Life there in Lima. It was a big event. What's happened to it?
Yeah, well, I've been part of the March for Life since this was just a few hundred people in front of the Justice Ministry a few years ago. But then after the Archbishopric, the Cardinal Bishop of Lima took it over, it just grew, by leaps and bounds. You had double the people every year. We crossed 100,000, 200,000, 500,000. We got to even up to 750,000 people. It was just a referent for the defense of life and that public, massive, festive, very happy, a lot of young people. People were, really impressed, and they were trying to, imitate this March of Life for Lima around the country and around Latin America, right? I've spoken with people who said how important it was for the March for Life in Argentina to get going and to grow. Then we had a change in bishop, and suddenly the march disappeared. We just had a press release saying that the march would not be back in 2018, which when we had the change in bishop. I had a note saying that, well, this march was going to be held in August, not in March as it normally was. So we were just waiting for that. We didn't know really the reason. August came and went, and there was no march. And what we knew was that the bishop wanted to give it a different theme, not just a march for life for the unborn, but for all lives. There was no agreement between the organizers of the march and the bishop on that. So the bishop said, well, then you take care of it. And it's become just a Facebook fan page as of now. And we are all disconcerted because of the importance that, defending life is for the church's mission today and for us Catholics in Peru. Actually, there was a study carried out by Ipsos International about abortion in the world, around the world. And in that study, back in 2016, when the march was like around 500,000, Peru was the country, the most pro-life country in the world. Just 11% of Peruvian people in general were open to the idea of abortion. I asked one of the big pro-life activists here in Lima what he thought the reason for that was, and he said, the March for Life plays a big role in that wonderful number. Well, that March for Life is no longer here, and of course, we yearn for it to be back. Many things have to be done to defend life, but that massive, festive, youthful presence on the streets is very important.
That's a troubling development, Edy Morel, in Peru. Bishop Siemieniewski, the Cardinal Wyszynski we talked about earlier, even before this all started, this pro-life movement, decades ago, didn't Cardinal Wyszynski speak out very strongly for life?
Yes, I think that we have to start with putting in context his position. We have to remember that our neighbors from the East, the Soviet communist state, introduced abortion accessible for everyone already in the 1920s, so 50 years before it came to the United States. Then in the Polish territories, it was introduced as a free abortion by the Nazi occupying forces, authorities, and then it was reintroduced by the communist government in 1956. So this was the context which Cardinal Wyszynski wanted to confront. And his approach was appealing to the dignity of the royal priesthood of baptized persons. And he taught, let us keep our mind on the crib in Bethlehem. Why? Because Jesus Christ, the incarnated Son of God, sanctified the human life from the very beginning to its death. So this was his teaching, appealing not so much to the legal problems connected with abortion, but to the faith, dignity, sanctity of life, appealing to the Christian conscience, and formulated this appeal as a call to fight against the social and national vices and sins. And it had a powerful effect. Really, it was a great awakening of consciousness in Poland around this grave sin.
Cardinal Wyszynski, of course, being honored in his native Poland throughout this year. Martin, German bishops continue to distance themselves from Rome with their synodal path. Where does the pro-life movement stand there?
Regarding the synodal path, there's one forum that's dealing with the sexual doctrine of the Church, and the vast majority of this forum says that it needs to be changed, it needs to be reformed. And the reason for that is that they think that it contradicts new findings of human sciences with regard to multiple dimension of sexuality, of the meaning of sexuality. And I think that's naturally has a link and is touching the pro-life movement, as they are very much in favor of natural family planning versus artificial contraception, while this forum is asking or demanding the to allow the acceptance of artificial contraception, the blessing of same-sex couples, and remarried divorcees. So there's a lot of contradictions, but yet it is a clear statement against abortion also in this first document, this first proposal of this forum. With regard to the March for Life in Berlin, one must say that only recently, or in the recent years, some bishops, only a few bishops, joined that life, participated in it. A lot of them regarded it with suspicion, but more and more bishops at least send their blessings and their greetings to it. So yes, there is still the pro-life movement does not really feel to be backed up by the majority of the bishops.
Martin Rothweiler in Germany. I'm Brian Patrick for Bishop Andrzej Siemieniewski in Poland, Edy Morel in Peru, and Martin Rothweiler in Germany. Thank you for watching. We hope you'll join us throughout this new year for the Catholic Sphere here on EWTN.